show. Yesterday was the first of three final days of legislative session, and amid all of the activity there is to try to override the governor's veto or agree with the mandatory vetoes, you had the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules meet. And this is a committee of equal parts Democrats and Republicans. It is a bipartisan legislative committee that is meant to oversee the rulemaking process when it comes to laws that are crafted, passed, and enacted. One thing we've been focusing on day in, day out is the litigation against the state's gun and magazine ban. But as that litigation continues, the ban is in place. It's been in place since January 10th. You cannot purchase certain semi-automatic firearms unless you are part of a special class that the law carved out. There are challenges about that idea of having equal protection rights violations there. But you also have the Second Amendment rights, which are in the courts. You had the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals on Friday overturn a lower court's preliminary injunction, but in the lower courts, there's separate arguments from those cases still being argued and yet to see any outcome there. So the case is still being debated in the courts on whether the law is constitutional. But you do have the rules that Illinois State Police filed, emergency rules they filed for the gun registry as part of the law that kicked in October 1st. And there's a January 1st deadline to register or face criminal penalties. So the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules, and if you've been watching for a while, you saw that how last month they meet monthly, this bipartisan group. There were two motions that were brought up. One was a motion to oppose the emergency rules for the gun ban registry. That was split bipartisan. All right, so it did not pass. Instead, they had a motion for a recommendation, and they recommended state police hold 3 public hearings. Illinois State Police conducted those 3 public hearings. They were at JCAR yesterday to provide an update. Here is Suzanne Bond. She is an attorney with Illinois State Police, providing an overview to the committee yesterday at the State House.
Yes, sir. The final hearing concluded yesterday. They were well attended by the public and various organizations. Those groups have committed to sending us their questions in writing to the extent possible. If we had answers, we did provide them. We pointed them to relevant FAQs on our website, which have been updated. One of the things that came out of the hearing yesterday that we are currently working on is that we were asked if we could put forth like a roadmap of how the FAQs had been updated so that people will know what FAQs are new, what FAQs have been amended, and we are working to do that and hope to have that up maybe later this week, definitely before the end of November. We are in the process, so you can see I have a binder, and within this binder are the emails that we had received prior to the deadline set for the hearings themselves. We are in the process of organizing all of the emails that we have received, even those that continued to come in after the deadline. We are dividing them up into people who just wanted to submit a comment, people who had questions. We are now getting suggested language for our proposed rules. So we are dividing that up into buckets, if you will, so that we can address questions either through the FAQs, through the amendments to the proposed rules, or both, depending on what is most appropriate. We received a letter from your staff with 32 questions, I believe, and we anticipate responding to that memo this week with answers to all of those questions and pointing out where we will be adding to FAQs, where we have already added to FAQs, and where we will be proposing amendments to our proposed rules to address the questions that your staff has raised.
This is Susan Bond. She is a attorney with Illinois State Police, breaking down some of the questions that they've heard and also telling JCAR that they will indeed respond to questions that JCAR's proposed, more than 30 questions that JCAR's proposed. So the question is also, well, there's a lot of people that wanted to provide public comment, but they couldn't provide public comment because the cutoff time for them to actually physically provide that comment. Instead, she said that, yes, indeed, there is a November 20th deadline for people to provide written comment. And if you go and check out their website here, of course, this is the public statement that they made, buried in the Illinois Register. If you're not familiar with the Illinois Register, it is a not the newspaper, not the state journal register, the Illinois Register, maintained by the Secretary of State's office. It is a rolling publication, and there are thousands of pages published to this of administrative rules, of different types of announcements. Whenever the governor had all the emergency declarations he had during COVID, those were all published in the Illinois Register. It is a rolling publication of thousands and thousands and thousands of pages. I mean, just tens of thousands of pages. But they had this in the Illinois Register. Do you go and read the Illinois Register regularly as a gun owner to, keep up to date with what your state government's doing? Highly doubt that. But anyways, this was in there.
I think it'd be useful.
You can check this out where you've got the indication of when the written comments can be provided and where you can provide those written comments. And it says right here, name and address, an agency contact person, any interested party may direct comments, data, views, or arguments concerning this proposal by November 20th. All right, so you got to email isp.legal.publiccomments@illinois.gov, or you can snail mail Kelly Griffith, Chief Legal Counsel, Illinois State Police, 801 South 7th Street, Suite 1001S, Springfield, IL 62704. By November 20th, you can provide those written comments for these emergency rules. State Representative Ryan Spain, who's a co-chair of the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules, he encouraged people to get those public comments in.
I think it'd be useful for clarification. If it's not November 20th, I would just encourage any public who are listening. I would encourage make your comments known in the next week, and I appreciate some flexibility from the state police and your ability to respond and receive those comments. But the period of public comment is coming to a close sometime in the near future. So now is the time to raise any further questions. I know that some people attended these hearings with the expectation that they would be able to testify or make some comments on the record. But if they had missed the deadline for doing so for the public hearing, they may not have been able to participate at one of the 3 hearings you've held. So the final recourse for submitting comments is to do so now. I would advise in the next maybe week's worth of time, I would encourage anyone listening to do so.
And Spain went on to talk about the importance of having the record as well, because there were public hearings and some people couldn't hear during those public hearings. Even during the first public hearing, there were problems with the WebEx. They had to have a phone off to the side to be able to have somebody on the phone going through the WebEx because there wasn't a connection with the computers that they had set up in the Springfield meeting. Chicago meeting seemed to go off without a hitch, but there wasn't much public turnout despite Todd Vandermeide being there to provide public comment. But and several others as well. Don't want to downplay that, but you still have the lack of people hearing what happened. So Ryan Spain, he asks, is there going to be a public record here for these comments and the responses from Illinois State Police to actually be heard, like video, audio recordings, not just what Greg Bishop captured? And trust me, I get it. I've had people reach out saying, can you please post the raw? Listen, I didn't take the entirety of these meetings. As a reporter, I'm bouncing around trying to get different angles and capturing snippets, and then I'm like, okay, that's good. I might be able to provide some of that, but not the entirety that everybody wants. You can get that at the Illinois State Police website. If you go to their frequently asked questions page and the Protect Illinois Communities Act page, you can actually see that. I'll pull that up here in a moment for you. But here is the attorney for ISP saying, indeed, those will be posted, man. They are posted.
Great. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I know that I received some feedback that, and I think this was specific to yesterday, but the room configuration may have been a little bit difficult to hear. I know that we had streaming coverage of these hearings. Is there a way for the public to go back, or is there a recording available of the hearings if anyone missed them and they would like to listen to them again?
Yes, there are recordings from WebEx from all 3 that will be, there will be a link on the State Police website to all 3 of those hearings. Then I'm going to mess this up, but the Blue Room maybe also streamed the first two hearings, and there are links to those on our website, or there will be links to those on our website as well.
Okay. Thank you for that. Final question then, just sort of setting the stage for, or setting our expectations together for when we will meet again as this committee in December. That meeting will take place at the Blandick Building in Chicago. But do you anticipate the state police will be prepared at that time to discuss changes from the emergency rules to now the proposed permanent rules, that changes that have been contemplated and considered as a result of these three hearings? Will you be able to tell us what has changed when we meet again in December?
That is what we would prefer to do. We would like to give the public as much notice on changes as possible. And so I believe if we don't make your December meeting, then they won't have an opportunity to see those changes. So we're working with the JCAR staff to ensure that we are able to get on that agenda and provide you with at least as many proposed changes as we have before that November 20th.
So, a question that we'll delve into with both Ryan Spain and with co-chair State Senator Bill Cunningham, a Democrat, again, a bipartisan committee here. Are they going to suspend the rules? If this is still maintained in the courts and there's continued mounting questions about vagueness, could JCAR suspend those rules? Because there's three options. They tried two of them last month. It was a tie vote on objecting, which really just would have been, something to say to the courts, look, the legislative body doesn't appreciate these rules either, so the courts strike this down. But that didn't pass. They got the motion for recommendation to have these public hearings. There's a third motion they could make, and that's to suspend these rules, these emergency rules. So we'll hear what State Representative Ryan Spain had to say about that question, but also State Senator Bill Cunningham had to say about that question. But State Senator Sue Rezin, she had a particular question during the JCAR hearing yesterday for Suzanne Bond, the state police attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I received a few phone calls in the last hearing that you had regarding it was very difficult to hear because there wasn't a microphone set up. Just, for the record, can you explain what happened and let us know on the previous hearings, was that the issue as well, or was there some kind of problem at this particular place?
We had a very difficult time locating a facility that could accommodate us in the southern portion of the state. Caseyville was very gracious and agreed to allow us to use their village hall. I believe it was a miscommunication. There was a misunderstanding that we thought that there would be a speaker in PA. If we had realized that there was not, we would have brought one with us. I suppose hindsight's 2020. We should have been prepared with our own.
So hindsight's 2020. Should have been prepared with their own. Listen, Illinois State Police, and I think everybody recognizes, has a tall order here with crafting these rules and getting public input. But the
questions on it.
The consequence here of these rules could lead people to become a felon if they don't either hightail it out of the state, transfer their firearms to somebody else out of state, destroy their firearms, maybe take it to a buyback program if it's being offered, or just turn them over, right? Or people who don't comply, they could face possible criminal charges. Yeah, your district attorney, your state's attorney, your sheriff might not file charges, but what about the Illinois Attorney General? Could they step in? I don't know these answers. But still, you've got the ongoing question of the consequence here. And they didn't do justice to get a PA system so that the public impacted by this could actually understand the ramifications of all of this. Regardless. All right, so that was JCAR yesterday with Illinois State Police there to answer questions. We connected with State Representative Ryan Spain afterwards at a different event, and we'll talk about the Invest in Kids stuff here in a moment. But you got Ryan Spain, co-chair of JCAR, asked at an unrelated news conference about What's going on here with the rules for the gun ban registry?
We continue to work with the Illinois State Police. They've promulgated emergency rules regarding the registration of certain firearms. They just finished having their public hearings. They had 3 throughout the state. So now it's time to collect all of the feedback, which was very, very extensive. And they've committed to reporting back, answering those very meaningful questions for citizens, for responsible firearm owners throughout the state, and addressing changes that should be made at our December JCAR meeting. Yeah, we need to move quickly, though. We need to understand what changes are happening because there is January 1st requirement. So I think it would be better to see some adjustments from the state police in December rather than waiting for after a deadline is passed and then understanding what changes might be made for permanent rules. Yeah, I think there are a number of unresolved issues, so I look forward to seeing if they come any closer to resolution. I think ultimately we're waiting for some action on this now at the Supreme Court level. The Supreme Court of the United States is going to need to weigh in on these issues, and I expect that they will at some time. But you raise a lot of very fair questions. For in the meantime, what does this mean for law-abiding firearm owners in the state of Illinois who continue to raise a lot of legitimate questions to the state police about their requirements and responsibilities?
But should there be a vote to suspend?
Well, we'll see. I mean, I called for a vote to issue a formal objection, which resulted in a tie during our October meeting.
So again, the question is, could JCAR vote? Is it judicious for them to vote to suspend these rules, especially as it's pending litigation? You've got the question possibly going up to the U.S. Supreme Court, if not the law being put on hold by the Southern District Court. That's a possibility with pending cases still. Democrat State Senator Bill Cunningham, co-chair of JCAR, we connected with him afterwards and asked him these pointed questions about the whole process of the gun ban registry rules.
I don't want to guess about what sort of action the
Suspension
department will take at any subsequent meeting. I will say that the state police have done a good job of reaching out for public input. That's what we've asked them to do. They held 3 community hearings to take input. That's not something they had to do, but we requested they do that. They have. And I think they have a very difficult job in front of them right now, and I think they're doing it well. I don't know what sort of, off the top of my head, I don't know what the calendar looks like, what sort of statutory deadlines we're dealing with. So because of that, I don't want to speculate in it. I just don't know what the time frame is without checking with staff.
So Cunningham, not sure necessarily how impacted people may be come January 1st, but he was also asked just about the ongoing confusion that there is and how they're going to be able to manage that if there is, say, low compliance rate, as we saw. 2,900 people have told state police that they have some kind of banned item. There are 2.4 million firearm owners identification card holders. Granted, not all of them have a firearm, but just as a people who say they're gun owners, only 0.12% have told police that they have that. Is that the number of state police that have complied with this? Is that the number of other law enforcement that may have complied with this? I don't know. Of course, do you want that to be known who actually registered? I think that's the whole point here against registration that people are making is that it violates the Fifth Amendment, violates the 14th Amendment, also has questionable outcomes for hackers and so on. But either way, Senator Cunningham talked about some of the other ins and outs when it comes to the questions and the concerns and the confusion.
Yeah, listen, this is something we get into with JCAR a lot. The law is the law. There is no changing the law in the rulemaking process. Obviously, there are important details that are added on, but there are individuals that just simply disagree with this law that it is in place. So I don't know that they're ever going to be pleased with the final product, but we have to make sure that the state police follows the proper rulemaking procedures. They have done that so far, and I anticipate if they continue to do that, then a rule will go forward.
And more from Cunningham, questions from the media yesterday.
I wouldn't want to speculate. We have a saying that every law is constitutional until a court tells you it's not. So the state police has to go along with the rulemaking as contemplated by the law.
With this emergency rule in place, though, for 150 days from late September, that puts, the question way past January 1st. With these emergency rules in place and the question possibly in front of the Supreme Court, isn't it judicious to suspend the rules until a date out?
I think, as I said, we have to assume that the law is constitutional until a court tells us it's not.
So again, that's just some of the response from both sides of the aisle on this when it comes to are the commissioners there, the legislators on the Joint Commission on Administrative Rules, going to vote to suspend the rules? They meet next month. They did not take a vote yesterday. They just simply asked some questions from ISP and got some updates. They meet next month in Chicago, the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules. We'll cover that. We'll bring you the latest each and every weekday morning here with Bishop on Air. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow along. Find me on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, whatever is your social media poison. But obviously YouTube here live each and every weekday morning from 7:40ish to whenever. All right, but got to take a quick breather, and then we'll be back to talk a bit more about veto session and the first of the final 3 days. Today's the second of the final 3 days. But what happened yesterday? Some interesting stuff popping up in the Legislative Audit Commission and the Senate Executive Appointments Committee and the Investing Kids Scholarship Grants program that's going to expire unless lawmakers do something about it. Stay tuned. We'll get to all of that.